This is Realigned and Unfiltered.
Together, we're peeling back the layers, exploring consciousness, and transforming life's messiness into meaning.
Welcome back to Realigned and Unfiltered. In our last episode, Carlie led us through the deconstruction phase, that inner unraveling that happens when life, beliefs, or our identity we've been living no longer fit. And when we go through the awakening, the first stage is often a breakdown. But it's not a breakdown in the way we think. It's the brain and identity that's unraveling these old patterns, which is actually neuroplasticity at work. And our nervous system is recalibrating as our sense of self is also reorganizing. So, although it feels chaotic, it's preparing us for the remembering, which is the rediscovery of who we really are beneath all of this programming. So we're going to get into that into the next episode. But before we do, and as we have these conversations, you can always count on us, always grounding these topics and these discussions with neuroscience and theory and research. So today, I'm going to take you deeper into the neuroscience of what's really happening during the breakdown, because from a brain perspective, deconstruction isn't just emotional chaos. It's actually this neurological reorganization. And then Carlie is going to take us more into about talking more about the theory of positive disintegration.
That's right. And I'm really excited about this episode, Diana, because I feel like you bring such juicy brain science to the conversation. I'm learning so much from you. So I'm really excited for everybody to get a chance to hear the grounding science behind this deconstruction, disintegration period that we're talking about. And we felt like that was really important to get into
Yeah.
before this soul remembering stuff that can feel a little bit less grounded. So we really want to
Yeah.
ground this whole thing and give everybody
It's
something to really feel like they're taking away from this.
right. It's how I like to learn, right? I love all talking about the spirit and everything, but I'm like, okay, now tell me the science behind it. Give me some facts behind that. We're gonna get into that here now. So when we say that we're kind of in this deconstruction phase, that we're falling apart, what's really happening here is it's our brain is letting go of all these old neural pathways that we have formed, the ones that have kept us operating in this survival, right? Or in this self-image that we have that truly was never fully ours. And
Mhm.
so what happens in the brain when we deconstruct is that every habit that we have, every belief, and our identity, right, our self-concept that we hold, it's encoded in our neural network. And it's this web of neurons that we have that fire together every time we think or feel in the same pattern.
Mhm.
And it's actually a Canadian neuropsychologist, um, Donald Hebb, and he was the father of neuropsychology. And he was the first one to explain that our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors physically shape the brain. And his famous principle is that neurons that fire together wire together. And
Aha.
so, what this means is that every time that you have a repeated thought, behavior, or an emotional response to something, the neurons involved, they strengthen their connection, right? They get stronger. And
Mhm.
over time, that pattern actually becomes automatic, right? Like a mental habit or this identity loop that we have going.
Yeah.
And so, and so if someone is constantly thinking, I'm not enough, those neural circuits become stronger and they also become faster. And so
Right.
when you're consciously choosing new thoughts or new experiences, you you're able to weaken those old connections and then be able to build new ones. And so when we think about the deconstruction phase, what's actually happening is that your brain actually begins to unwire those old connections, those
Mhm.
habitual patterns that we have that are they no longer match who we're becoming, right? So it's
Right.
actually Hebb's law in reverse. his laws, neurons that fire together, wire together. Now it's neurons that no longer fire together, unwire together.
Cool.
So it's the reverse of that. And that's the neurological foundation for the transformation that we're going through, because your brain is literally reshaping itself to match the evolving identity that we're going through. Right.
Right.
So most of us, we also we live in what's called in neuroscience the default identity network.
Okay.
And I want you to think about it like the default setting of your mind, and that's what our mind goes to, which is where our sense of self is created. And that's created from our memories, our beliefs, our habits, our values, and those emotional imprints that we have. And you
Mm-hmm.
could also think about that like software, like a program that you have running that's quietly in the background of our mind, right? Over time, the software, the program that we have running, it becomes truth. This is what's the software we have running. It's the truth. It's what we have going. And it
Mm-hmm.
shapes how we see the world and ourselves. So then when we talk about awakening, we're really not just talking about like this spiritual buzzword, really, because at its core, awakening begins with a deconstruction. And it's sometimes sometimes, and we talked about this in the last episode, sometimes it is that it could be like a gentle breakdown, or a very dramatic, significant event, right? That breaks
Mm-hmm.
us open.
Mm-hmm.
And that's of the breakdown of who we think we are. And
Right.
then so in neuroscience terms, this is the moment when our brains, those well-worn, neural pathways that we have, the ones that keep our identity and our beliefs on autopilot, this is when those neural pathways begin to loosen in this deconstruction phase.
Right. And so then that automatic belief
Mm,
system or that default identity network is challenged. And that can be
yeah,
then really disorienting because my sense of self is based on this thing and this
yeah.
set of beliefs. And now all of a sudden I'm asking questions and I'm guessing my nervous system starts going danger, danger, danger.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And so in the deconstruction phase, right, um, life circumstances that happen, right, it could be grief, it could be a loss, it could be burnout, or
Hmm.
it could also be, simply just that a lot of people talk about, like, I just have this inner calling for something else, right? I just feel like there's something more to this, or,
Hmm.
it disrupts that default program. And so neurochemically, it feels like instability. Your nervous system may move from that safety and that predictability into that fight, flight, or freeze response, or even like numbness, right? And then consciousness wise, we're also the lens through which we're seeing the world. It's cracked, right? It's cracked. So
Those
so when you
cracks we
start,
talked about.
yeah, those cracks that we talked about, right? So when we go through the loss or awakening or trauma or any type of identity crisis, your brain's old wiring, it starts to destabilize. And
Hmm.
so the identity statements that you've had before, right? Like you're no longer feeding those I ams anymore. Like I am, whatever identity that you were reclaiming before, the ones that once defined you. The lack of that reinforcement triggers the brain's system to start
Hmm.
saying, "Hey, hold on, wait, who am I without this role? Who am I without this belief or this
Right.
certainty of myself?"
Right.
And then this is when like the amygdala. So the amygdala, it's just part of your brain. It's so funny. I created a video on this where I talked about the amygdala being like this ant, your tia. In Spanish we say ants, being the word ant is called tia. And I don't know why. This is just the way I remembered amygdala. But amygdala is like this ant, or that's always just like, hey, be careful. It's your fear and emotional center in your brain. It's the
It's
back of
your
your brain.
Tia in your brain going, warning.
Yes, yeah. And so your amygdala, your fear and emotional alarm system, it lights up, and it's this constant state of awareness. It's like, well, hey, hold on. If you're risky and you do that, you're not gonna like it. Do not do that, right? So it's like this very like be careful kind of center
Uh-huh.
in your brain. And so it's this constant with your amygdala, it's this constant heightened sense of awareness, and with the things that give you anxiety and things that can that can trigger grief and anger, and it acts so quickly before your logical center of your brain, which is your prefrontal cortex,
Uh-huh.
can even respond to anything, because your
Uh-huh.
amygdala, it functions out of your subconscious mind. And if you remember from the last episode, one of the last episodes, your subconscious mind is running 95% of your life, right?
Right.
And only 5% of the time you're actually consciously aware of what it is that you're doing.
And this is
So
connected to
you're
the autonomic nervous system as well, which is
mm,
automatically running. So we have this automatic thing that's happening in our
right,
bodies as well.
right,
Always bringing the
yeah,
body into.
yes, yes. And so your amygdala is running, and it's constantly telling these stories over and over again, keeping you in this confused state and this heightened sense of anxiety, or in the numbness, or whatever triggers that you're fighting.
Right.
And that's why, again, you're always so tense up, you're tied up in your nerves. So we're going to get this into the more in the next episode, but just to briefly mention, we need to be able to calm that amygdala down, calm the tia,
Mhm.
like, tia, chill.
Yeah.
I got this,
Tia,
be able
have
to like
some
calm
tea.
yes, have some tea, right? Like, but I mean, with all its good intention, right? We have to be able to just like calm the amygdala down, which is in the subconscious mind. And we want to be able to activate the conscious mind, our prefrontal cortex. And one of the ways we do that is through the breath, right? Learning how to relax the nervous
Huh?
system, and learn to just breathe. But getting back into the chaos and anxiety of everything that we're experiencing with the deconstruction, we could really think about it like this. This isn't really dysfunction. It's actually your brain moving from this automatic wiring that we have
Mhm. Mhm.
to now we have to get into this conscious rewiring.
Mhm.
So in neuroscience, this is called neural pruning. And this is where your brain is literally kind of like dismantling all these outdated circuits so it can make space for new connections and these new neural pathways.
Mhm.
And think about it. I mean, I'm going through this right now. It's kind of like renovating a house. Before you could rebuild a house, you have to tear down walls, they don't serve anymore. It's not following the new blueprint that you have. and
Right.
and that's like the deconstruction, right? And it's messy, it's emotional, and sometimes it can feel like you're losing your mind. I know I felt like that with this house. We have a really old
Yeah.
farmhouse and we're
Yeah. And sometimes
deconstructing
it
that.
takes a lot longer than we want too. We're like, I
Yeah.
want that wall gone and I want a window there. And I'm just gonna keep staring at that wall, knowing that I don't want that there until one day I finally take a sledgehammer to it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, it could feel like that. It could feel like you're losing your mind, but really what's happening is you're losing you're no longer aligned with, right? It's where you're losing, yeah, what you're no longer aligned with, and where your higher mind, where maybe you could think about it like your spirit would wants to then move
Right.
into that prefrontal cortex, where you could then start consciously start rewiring and get into that logical thinking of, okay, now where is it that I want to go?
Right.
So so then that's where, again, like, your nervous system, it's recalibrating during this time. Your old identity it's dissolving. To your point, the body perceives this as like this is kind of like a death, because on a subconscious level it is. There's a lot
Right.
going on in the brain. On a subconscious level, it is a sort
Well,
of death.
yeah, it's a death in who you have always been, really. Like you
Mm-hmm.
said, it's the default identity network. So if this is my
Uh-huh.
identity and my ego, who we've talked about before, is like,
Uh-huh.
this is who we are, this is who we are in the world. And then all of a sudden we're starting to go, but are we?
Yeah.
Then if it
Yeah.
is going to change, then there is a death. There really is a death. And like we talked
Right.
about before, there's a lot of grief associated with that death. There's a lot of
Right. Right.
loss of self.
Right. And so to your point, like, if when these sensations come up, if we're able to meet meet these sensations like this anxiety and these feelings that we're having with awareness instead of resistance to them,
Uh-huh.
then we can start moving from this survival mode to like, I just need another day, to more of that creation mode, right? We start shifting, we moved more to that creation and more of that where now you could start designing and think about, okay, like how do I want my life to move forward, right? And that's the shift that happens when we move to the prefrontal cortex of the mind, of the brain, that holds
Uh-huh.
that higher reasoning, the vision and the compassion, and we begin to rearrange our thoughts that way. So even in the moments when it feels like everything is just falling apart, your higher brain is actually waking up, right?
Yeah, it's doing a lot of work. It's a lot of work in there. And it can
Yeah.
just feel like a lot of chaos. Like, what the heck is happening in my brain? Everybody's
Hmm.
doing their job. That's what's happening, right? Everybody's
Yeah.
doing their job inside of there. Just feels
Right.
like chaos because we threw a wrench into
Yeah.
it.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
I remember, there many seasons in my life where I thought my beliefs, my sense of control, my understanding of God, everything just crumbled, right?
Yeah.
And and when I think back at it, it's just like I thought, man, there's something wrong with me here, the way I'm thinking about this, but looking back, now that I understand what it is that I understand about the brain, I realize, hey, this was my neural identity that was dissolving. This is this is my brain was just trying to reconfigure itself and try to create these neural pathways. And it just provides so much perspective when you hear it this way. That's why I love learning about it this way and teaching it too. And
Uh-huh.
I think that's also why so many people that are going through this awakening or this deep loss, they describe it as both the most terrifying moment of their lives, but also if you listen closely, it's also something that's very sacred, right?
Yeah.
That people are going through with this.
So sacred. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So just remember, you're not just losing, you're being rewired for becoming a more integrated, authentic way of your being, right? We're recalibrating, we're readjusting here.
Yeah, yeah, and the sense of identity that you have always had maybe doesn't necessarily serve anymore in this life that you're currently living and the life that you're headed towards living. And so this renovation is required, and
Mhm.
renovation is messy and it's loud and it's exhausting and it's
Mhm.
overwhelming, and sometimes it takes longer than we mean for it to, and sometimes the
Yeah.
contract is late, and it's okay. It's just
Yeah.
all part of the process.
Right. 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 And then what's fascinating too is in psychology, there's actually a name for this, right? Of this inner collapse that leads to growth, and it's called positive disintegration. And Carlie, you're gonna take us deeper into that, right? To
Yeah,
to
okay.
Dabrowski and how this process kind of it parallels the awakening journey that we've been unpacking here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you, neuroscience. I feel like we should have a title for you other than brain nerd. Thank you, brain nerd. Um,
So,
thank you, Dr. D, for all that,
oh,
for all of that. And I think it is really empowering to know that there is neuroscience to explain what is going on. Like, you're not just going through some sort of spiritual awakening or spiritual development. You're not doing this outside of your human self, right? Your brain is your human
yeah.
self. Your brain is part of this body, which is this vehicle that we drive through this human experience, right? So the
Mhm.
brain has to go through the process with us. The brain has to do the rewiring too. And while we may feel that spiritually or, our soul kind of has this idea of
Mhm.
this being we want to be, or this place we want to get to, or this way of living we want to, there's still a lot of physical reorganization that has to happen
Yeah.
in order to really support that. So, like, my goal may be to live a little bit less defined in my way of,
Mhm.
but it is hard to actually say out loud, I don't actually define myself as blah, blah, blah,
Mhm.
whatever I used to, right?
Mhm.
It's like, oh, I don't, can I do that? And
Yeah.
that's just your brain doing its thing. I
Yeah,
feel like that is really
exactly.
empowering. That is really empowering. So another thing that I find really empowering is looking at the history of psychology and the history of sort of psychological research and finding that there
Mhm.
have been theories for a long time.
Mhm.
Theories for a long time about this process. And one that I came across actually fairly recently. So I'm not well versed in it, even though it
Okay.
feels like it's telling the story of my belief system.
Mhm. Yeah.
One that I came across recently is the theory of positive disintegration,
Mm.
and it was actually proposed and researched and put forward by a Polish psychologist called, here we go, I'm going to just butcher a name here, Kazimierz Dabrowski. I can say
Mhm.
Dabrowski. Kazimierz Dabrowski. So he was a Polish psychologist who started actually researching and talking about this in the 1930s, and
Mhm.
then really started publishing from the 50s to the 70s on positive or disintegration. Highly recommend checking it out for all of you psychology nerds out there. There's some good articles online, and there's a book as well, which came out in 1970, I believe, by Dabrowski himself. It agrees that the awakening process can feel quite isolating, because it begs the question, why isn't everybody doing this? Why isn't everybody going through this? Why do I feel
Mhm.
alone here? Am I losing it? Right. And, and what's happening is that you're coming to a place where the status quo no longer applies. The status quo
Mm.
no longer sits well with you. And
Mhm.
is that okay? Well, Carl Jung actually always talks about the theory of individuation. So becoming yourself separate from the programming of your parents or your religion or your culture or whatever. Like, really, the process of individuation is becoming your own true self, coming back to the self. And positive disintegration was sort of developed in a similar timeline, a little bit later than that. And so the first aspect of this actually says that inner turmoil is a sign of growth. So the emotional intensity, the anxiety, the what could often be considered and pathologized by psychology now. There's a depression, sometimes there's an anxiety, there's high emotionality, there's
Mhm.
this inner turmoil that's just like, why? Well, it goes
Right.
because Tia is going off,
No,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
Tia is not having it. And so there's big conflict going on in your brain. This is actually a sign of growth. This is actually a
Mm.
positive sign that this disintegration is the breaking down of old structures in order for you to find newer, higher ones. So you're
Mm.
moving from a sort of status quo, basic, basic human, a status quo,
Yeah.
basic human existence to a higher level of consciousness, which the human journey is about. And now
Right. I
here's the
love that.
thing, not all humans are on the same journey. So
Right.
Dabrowski talks about, and I won't get into too much, how there are different levels of consciousness.
Mhm.
There's actually a few different people, David Hawkins, I think, as well. Different people talk
Mm.
about levels of consciousness.
Yeah.
And Dabrowski talks about how there's kind of different levels of consciousness. And so level one is when you're just really wrapped up in the status quo, in that,
Yeah.
here's your life. Okay, thank you very much. I'm happy with this. And that's what I'm going to do.
Social rules. Yeah.
Social rules, social norms, just basic level of existence, and you're totally okay with that. And that
Mhm.
is fine.
Mhm.
Let's take away the judgment from that,
Right.
because I think sometimes people get into the like, oh, well, I think differently than the basic humans. And so therefore no, everybody is on their own journey, right?
Mhm.
Everybody's on their own journey. And there was probably a time where accepted whatever spoon was fed to you as well. And then you stopped doing that. You started looking around, you had your little cracks, and that's great because that's the journey your soul is on.
Mhm.
And so that's not really the point of this. The point of this is that Dabrowski is saying it's necessary to go through this disintegration. It's
Yeah.
necessary to go through this anxiety, depression, existential crisis, because they're
Mhm.
all signaling growth. They're not signaling
Yes.
failure, they're signaling growth. I have so many people come into my office, my virtual office, so many people, so many clients coming to me and just saying like, what is going on? What is wrong with me? And
Yeah.
I constantly look at people and I say, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you.
Mhm.
Actually, what I'm noticing is that there's everything right with you,
Mm,
and now I
mhm.
have the neuroscience that you brought in to sort of a little bit more.
Yeah.
But what's right is that you're asking questions that are hard to ask.
Mhm.
And you're feeling how big of a death is happening inside of you. And that's
Right.
okay. So
Yeah.
the theory challenges the idea that psychological stability always equals health. That's what positive disintegration challenges that. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Psychological stability does not equal health. Sometimes psychological instability, this shake it up process means you're doing it right. You're
Mm,
awakening. You're getting to that
mhm,
next level of consciousness that
mm.
actually is this human journey goal. So good for you.
Gosh.
Good for you.
Yeah. I love this. I love this. Like, I mean, I've never heard of him before, but I love that he taught this and stated this because it's true. It's like
Me too.
nothing's wrong with you. This is normal. This is part of the experience for a reason on Earth as a human.
Yeah, and it's exciting for me too because I had kind of felt this way, like this is normal, and I'd understood it through the Jungian lens of
Right.
individuation process.
Hmm.
Been going through this for a long time, walking people through this for a long time. Only recently did I find Dabrowski, and I was like, how have I never heard this before? So
Hmm. Hmm.
the second core idea is that this disintegration is necessary. So true personality growth requires going through external and internal conflict. So
Okay. Yeah.
maladjustment to social norms and disintegration of the old self is a requirement to this. Kind of what I just said
Mm.
in one and two, I just blended together a little bit there. Disintegration is a prerequisite for readjusting to a higher level of being.
And it's
Number
when those first, sorry, it's when
no,
those first cracks appear, right? That second level, like that disintegration, the cracks start appearing, and you're like, um, okay, now what? What is my
yeah,
direction? Kind of.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so theories like this or episodes like this are here to say, actually, this is normal and it's necessary and it's good. Good job. Hang in there. Hang
Yeah.
in there. You have an idea about where you want your window or where you want
Uh,
your wall, and it
mhm,
might not
mhm.
be where it was given to you.
Yeah.
That's okay. Call a
Mhm.
contractor or just whip your sledgehammer out. I don't know. Up to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, so I love this. I have this little note here that human personality isn't flat, that there's levels and layers. And some people live
Mhm,
on a superficial level, and that's fine. That's fine.
mhm.
Others have the capacity to develop towards their highest potential. And so only a subset of people in each lifetime will go through this process, right? So
Ah,
let's just walk
interesting.
the judgment a little bit
Mhm,
on those
mhm.
don't or those who can't. And this is an interesting thing that I've observed is sometimes people will have the cracks and they'll have that awakening and they'll start asking those questions and then they'll feel that high level of anxiety or high level of depression or high level of emotionality or the existential crisis just feels too much and they'll go like, no, thank you. And
Ah.
shut it back down, right? I'm actually just going to go back to my original wiring. What did you
Oh,
call it? I wrote it down here. I'm going to go back to my default identity
default.
network. Feels safer. I'm more comfortable with that. That's where I'm going to stay. And you know what?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I can
Uh-huh.
understand that temptation. There have been many times where I've thought, is it too late for me to walk it back? Is it too late for me to just go back to where it felt easy and safe? And it's,
Oh,
and I have clients who will like they'll do some questioning, they'll do some big emotions and then they'll walk it back. And then, a few months later
oh.
they'll come back and say more please. And they have to titrate in. You know, you have to do the journey that you have to do. And that's
Mhm.
totally okay. It's totally
The
okay.
pace of it is totally okay.
Yeah.
There
And the
is
pace
no
of it, I mean, there's
rush.
no rush.
Yeah,
There's
there
no
is
rush.
no rush.
I don't know who said this. I know that it's a quote. I use it all the time. And it's that the ego is in a rush, right? The ego is in a
Mm,
rush to have identity. I need to know exactly who I am. So I'm in a rush to get through whatever this deconstruction is. Okay, do it then. Who
Mhm.
am I?
Mhm.
But the
Mhm.
soul is not. The
Mhm.
soul is not in a rush. The soul is not tied to a body that, has a time limit. The
Right.
soul has eternity to develop and develop and develop, where, the ego, the mind, this body, we got a time crunch here. So
Yeah.
whenever you feel in a rush, it's okay to just check back in with your soul.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, so number 3, development is self-directed. Development is self-directed. So becoming an active agent in your own development is very important here. This is the inner psychological transformation where you take your life in your own hands. So not what was handed to me, but what I want. So not the house I bought, but the house that I want to design, right? Just going off that
Mhm.
analogy of you and your big
Mhm.
construction zone that
Yeah,
you're.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. There's moral and psychic autonomy that grows here. Really getting into your own thoughts and your own psyche and being your own therapist. So, where
Mm.
you really start holding space for your questions, where you really start holding space for, does that morale that was handed to me actually fit what I feel on the inside, what I
Mhm.
think, what I sense, what I know, right? Um,
Okay.
I love the idea of being your own therapist, like having a look in the mirror and having a little conversation with the person that you see and being like, it's okay if that doesn't really vibe. And if you
Mm.
if you have a hard time doing that for yourself, find a therapist who will hold space for you in this journey and not give you an answer.
Yeah.
Right? Don't
Yeah.
don't let somebody give you an answer. Find your answers. But if you need somebody to help you find your answers, it's a good idea. It's a good
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
So this is kind of like where you start sensing like different possibilities for yourself, kind of, right? You start questioning, like, or you've questioned your old beliefs, and it's like, okay, now I'm sensing like, oh, there is this different direction I could take, or this different possibility or this different option.
Uh-huh.
Is that kind of did I
Yeah, you got
okay.
it. Like, I was always taught this, but
Mhm.
perhaps it's just when you start. So it's like a great example for me has always been when I started to look at the religion that I loved, look at the
Mhm.
religion that I was given as a child and raised in, and my community was there, and my security was there, and my first degree was there, and I knew it very well.
Mhm.
And at some point, especially because I lived in so many different cultures, around so many different religions, around so many different ways of beings, I started to realize maybe there isn't the truth. Maybe there's many truths. Maybe
Mhm.
there's different versions of truth. Maybe that truth makes sense to me because of where I come from, but that truth makes sense to you because of where you come from. And maybe that's okay. And
Mhm.
ooh, that was hard to think. That was hard to say because that certainly wasn't what I was taught. Now I can
Mhm.
decide what I want to believe, but now I have to actually let go of the fact that, like, what I believe isn't necessarily what everyone has to believe.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
Even that in
Mhm.
itself is a huge moral adjustment. That's a
Oh
huge
yeah.
adjustment, right? So, yeah. So this is what happens. This is what happens in this stage, and it's great. It's great. It's all part of becoming a little bit of a higher level of consciousness as you're walking through this story of life.
Yeah.
Um, there are levels or stages of disintegration. So there's the
Oh.
primary
Mhm.
integration, unaware conformity. That's, I guess, this is the levels. This is like that level
Mhm.
one I was talking about. You're just kind of unaware, you conform, you're just part of everything. Then there's the
Mhm.
uni level disintegration. So that's where you're in that conflict or confusion. Then there's the multi-level disintegration. So seeing higher values versus lower values, like I'm here
Yeah.
and you're there.
Mhm.
Secondary integration is living in alignment with one's own ideal. And then secondary integration with unity is
Oh,
the highest form of this. So I'm now
okay.
living with my ideals. I'm perfectly happy with other people to be living at their ideals. It's not a black and white situation, and I'm
Mhm.
living in unity with myself, right? So that's where
Okay.
we've
Yeah.
done the renovation. So we'll get into that.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I don't know if I want to include. Okay, so while there's a lot to say about the theory of positive disintegration, and there's a lot of steps and stages and understandings that we could do about this episode isn't necessarily to dive into that. What it is to
Mm.
say that this is a theory that the disintegration process is positive, right?
Mm. Yeah.
So aligning with the neuroscience that you taught us, Diana, is now this theorist who's saying it's absolutely okay and good and important and necessary for these people who have this really intense experience of anxiety and depression and overexcitability and I don't fit and why don't I understand what you're understanding and how come I don't fit the status quo anymore? Ah, it's very good. It's very necessary and it is
Yes.
painful. So why do we say it's positive? We say it's
Mm.
positive because it is a gift to have that sensitivity. It is a gift to have to go through this journey because you are going from the common understanding of the way life is, right? The status quo
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
a greater sense of understanding, a greater sense of self, a greater ability to question the world and the universe and all that is. And that is the gift of the human journey. That is the gift of
Yeah.
this journey that we are on. And so if you are able to do that, it's a beautiful thing. And so this is something that we were talking about that we love the imagery of the caterpillar. All right. So we have
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
caterpillar who's crawling around, eating all the leaves, eating all the things, and then goes into the chrysalis, the cocoon,
Yeah.
whatever. And the cool thing that I always like to point out with my clients is you think that they just go in there and sprout wings?
No.
Right?
Yeah.
When the butterfly, bites its way out and claws its way out and comes out, it doesn't look like a caterpillar with wings. It's a
Right.
completely different being. So how does that happen? What happens is the caterpillar actually starts to disintegrate and turns into
Oh, yeah.
the caterpillar goes down into a goo and somewhere in that goo is the DNA that is in there that is programmed to then build the butterfly. And so the
Ah,
process of
gosh.
turning and melting and molting into a goo, probably not so painless, right? But
Right.
so necessary. So
Right. Ah,
necessary.
I love that.
So you go into this little enclosed space and in this little enclosed time, and that's what this disintegration might often feel like. It might feel like I
Mhm.
can't be around people. I can't be around my friends, my family, my church, I just everything just feels like too much. I can't be around it because I'm in the process of turning into goo.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then what's going to happen is my DNA is going to rebuild me. I'm
Mhm.
going to rebuild and I'm going to turn into this completely new being. But there's still
Um,
that connection to who you were. It's not
yeah.
gone. It's not gone. But you've become this new being and you're going to go out and you're going to fly and you're going to see the world in a completely different way. And the thing is, you do that whole thing alone. But when you get up into the air, you're going to find a little, do they call butterflies flying together a flock? You're going to find your
I don't
butterfly.
I don't know that.
We should do a fact check section at the end. You're gonna find the other butterflies and you're gonna fly together,
Yeah.
right? You're
Yeah.
gonna go find gardens and find flowers and find things that you never could have conceived of when you were crawling around on the ground. And
Mm.
that's a really, really beautiful gift.
I love it. I love it because it provides the image, right? That the deconstruction of the self, it's not a regression, it's that metamorphosis, right? It's that birth into that higher version that you're stepping to the into the butterfly, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah, it's a metamorphosis. We would never say, "Oh, what a shame. That caterpillar,"
I know, right?
right? Like,
Yeah, we
"Oh,
do
what a
that to
shame."
ourselves. Sometimes, that it's so easy to judge someone else like, "Oh." we do that as humans. We do that all the time. But when you understand that this is what we all go through at some level,
Yeah.
at some point in time, understanding when someone's going through it at that time doesn't mean that you're going through it, doesn't mean that they're wrong for going through it whenever they are. It
Yeah,
it
that's true.
provides perspective.
Yeah, and just allow yourself to be on your own individual journey because that's
Mhm.
what this is. But there are
Yeah.
other people going on the journey too. And so
Hmm.
it's great to find other people and go like, it hurts, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there are it's great to find conversations like this where you can understand it does hurt and it is necessary. It does hurt and it is
Yeah.
important. It does hurt and it makes sense from a neuroscience perspective. Um,
Right.
and so there's a lot to learn. Um,
I
connecting
I
to
love it.
yeah, connecting to
It
your nervous system, right? Like you've got to connect to your nervous
Mhm.
system so that you can help yourself in the process of this. And maybe we talk more about that in the future.
Mhm.
And then yeah, as you reintegrate into the world, which is, a future episode, I think, when we're talking about um the reconstruction process. So, anyways,
Yeah.
passing back to you, I hope that it's helpful to learn a little bit about Dabrowski. And if you're interested, definitely look it up or ask questions in the comments. There's so much more to say, but there's only so much time to really put it out there. So what we really want to say is that this is a positive experience. It's well researched and
Mhm.
it's really, really necessary to get to that next level of consciousness. So don't be afraid.
I think it's so amazing how you just brought that in because when you think about it, that deconstruction phase equals that positive disintegration, right? It's the same thing, but different terminology, right?
Yeah.
Different way of seeing it and explaining it. So I think it's just so beautiful about everything we explored today, from the neuroscience of deconstruction to Dabrowski's, again, positive disintegration. And that it reminds us that falling apart, it's not the end of our story. You know, what's really happening, it's our nervous system, our mind, our soul is all clearing space for the next version of us to emerge. And so this dismantling part of everything, it's sacred. It is very sacred. We're shedding false identities, beliefs, and those patterns of survival that
Hmm.
truly were never us, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Or they
that
were us. They were us.
at some point,
And they're
well,
not anymore. And it's
right.
okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then that leads us into the next, where we're heading into next, which is the remembering.
Mhm.
Remembering, the truth that still lives underneath programming that we could have, you know, that we've taken on.
Mhm.
Um, Remembering the divinity, right? The divine intelligence that has always been guiding us, and been along the ride there with us.
Mhm.
And so I would say, if you're in that in between right now, right? You've gone through the deconstruction, you're not who you were, and you're not yet where you're going, you're not yet who you're becoming. Hold yourself with grace here in this moment in time. You're in the most transformative part of the whole journey. You're in this metamorphosis, um, part of
Mhm.
it all.
Mhm. Mhm. And it's a
So,
good thing. It's a good, good
yeah,
thing. And we're so, so happy to be able to support this journey for anybody who's listening and really relating.
yeah. So thank you for joining us on this conversation. In the next episode, we're going to dive deep into the remembering phase, where we begin again to reconnect to the essence of who we are beyond this deconstruction, and then start to rebuild from a place of our soul truth and the coherence that we have between our mind and our heart. And until then, just take a deep breath, calm that Thea down, take a deep breath, trust what's unfolding, and remember, you're not breaking down, you are breaking open.